There's fear and finger pointing over the future of the Bombardier railcar plant in Thunder Bay, Ontario. Bombardier is laying off half of its staff there. For more on this, let's bring in Conservative leader Andrew Scheer. He is in Regina today. Thank you, Mr. Scheer, for your time. Appreciate this.
Always a pleasure, thanks.
So obviously, you know, bad news for Ontario's manufacturing industry, really bad news for Canada when something like this happens. What was your reaction to learning about these impending layoffs?
Well, obviously, my first thoughts are with those people who are affected and their families. Anytime you hear of layoffs in any part of the country, in any sector, we know that the people that are affected by it need support and need programs to help transition into other workforces. Obviously, there are some concerning signs, some headwinds facing Canada and our economy that we're very concerned about the lack of action on the Liberal government preparing Canada for that, and specifically as it relates to our ability as the Canadian companies' ability to trade with other countries. One of the reasons cited for these layoffs was the Buy American provision that the United States still has on local infrastructure projects, something that was not addressed in the new NAFTA.
So let me ask you about this, because as you've seen, there's been a lot of back and forth, a lot of finger pointing, each accused of the Ontario government and then the federal government being accused of sitting on their hands, not getting this thing done. You know how these processes work. The government says the money's there. The Ontario government says, but you're not giving it. We've given everything that we need. What is happening here? What's the process? And is this just a miscommunication?
Well, I think what you're seeing is Justin Trudeau desperately trying to blame other people. It's his standard go-to. Nothing's ever his fault. He's always blaming others and never accepting responsibility. The independent parliamentary budget officer has indicated that the funds that the federal government set aside have not flown to the provinces, that the funds for these types of infrastructure projects just have not flowed through, and that a massive percentage of the funds are just sitting, not being used. That's why we saw last-minute changes in the recent budget, trying to get money out the door quickly on the eve of an election. So I think it's very clear that there were many infrastructure projects across the country that could have been completed by now if the Liberals have been good managers. But Trudeau's poor judgment and incompetence has created a situation where big projects just can't get built in this country right now.
But again, I just come back to some of the comments from the infrastructure minister, but saying the money is right here. You know, we signed, we're ready. You haven't given us enough from, I mean, there's a number of things, but paperwork and prioritization.
Well, again, I point to the parliamentary budget officer who came up with an independent analysis saying that there literally was no plan on behalf of the Liberal government, on the federal government. So for them to point the finger at lower levels, I know that there are premiers and provincial governments across the country who have said they do have projects ready to go, but you know it's taking so long for the federal government to agree on the framework agreements or to set criteria, or in many cases just to give the approvals to get these things flowing. When we were in government, the Conservative government got billions of dollars out the door to get big important infrastructure projects built, things like ports and bridges, and increasing our ability to get our products around the world in a short period of time, scandal-free with great value for taxpayers. And here in 4 years, we've seen the Liberal government do the exact opposite, fail to get these important projects built. And now we're seeing Canadian companies paying for it.
And let me kind of switch topics just for a moment. You're in Regina. Some important meetings going on in Saskatchewan, of course, with the premiers and leaders of the territories. What do you think about the work that's being done there, and what kind of an impact it might have in terms of the federal election?
Well, we know that in the last few months, Justin Trudeau has completely destroyed the relationship between the federal government and the many provincial governments. When we look at provincial governments fighting him in court over the carbon tax, when we look at his inability to listen to concerns around things like Bill C-69, the No More Pipelines bill, he's completely ignored the very real concerns that premiers are raising on behalf of their industries, on behalf of their people. I think there's a lot of great topics being discussed at this premiers meeting. I know that there is significant work being done on reducing trade barriers between provinces. That's something that I've indicated that as Prime Minister I will focus on. We've been able to sign free trade deals with some of the toughest negotiators around the world, with Europe, with Asian Pacific countries. Surely we should be able to sign a deal between Canadian provinces. So I'm hopeful that the work continues. it's an opportunity to reset the relationship. The divisive approach that Justin Trudeau has adopted, which is creating a lot of regional anxieties, we now have an opportunity in this election to elect a Conservative government that will have a much more cooperative approach.
Okay, and before I let you go, sir, I just wanted to ask this, your thoughts on this. So the Vice Chief of the Defence Staff, Lieutenant General Paul Winnick, abruptly retired. Obviously, it wasn't expected. He says he wants to spend more time with his family, but it wasn't expected. People expected him to stay on a little bit longer, as was promised, I guess, a year or so ago. What do you make of this?
Well, unfortunately, I think this is another example of collateral damage from the Mark Norman scandal. Right from the get-go, Justin Trudeau started this whole process by allowing an attempt at interference in a procurement contract, and then announcing that the RCMP would be pressing charges before they had even conducted an investigation. His government going to great lengths to prevent documents from coming to court, using code names to avoid access to information requests. There is a huge scandal here that they have gone to great lengths to cover up. And now we've lost another high-ranking member of our armed forces. So it's another example of the impact of Trudeau's poor judgment.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Conservative Leader Andrew Scheer, I appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much.